Welcome to Seminar Sunday, District 21's weekly episodic webinar series. This week we'll be talking about scheduling club meetings. Glad to have you all on the line this evening, and I'm looking so much forward to unraveling this topic. So this is a series, as I mentioned at the start of the webinar, weekly episodic series, which covers a variety of leadership and Toastmasters Club Excellence topics. This week, of course, is scheduling club meetings, but we also have a number of interesting topics coming up through the months of October, November, and beyond. I encourage you to visit the District 21 website and register for as many that interest you, and recommend it to club members as well who may be interested in various topics. They are not currently on the website, but they will be up after tonight's episode. Tonight's objectives are really three things that we're looking to uncover, and we'll make it kind of, I encourage you to take advantage of the chat, and there's a question feature at the top as well if you want to submit questions. Feel free throughout the whole webinar here to submit any questions through either of those channels, because we definitely want to make sure that this is interactive as can be. So we're going to share what our clubs are doing in terms of their proactivity and how scheduling works. We're going to discuss impacts of being ahead of the curve in terms of scheduling your meetings. And finally, we're going to review some of the options for scheduling meetings. So there's different platforms out there, both on the web, and of course, some clubs are doing just a basic Excel spreadsheet. So looking forward to hearing perhaps what your club is doing and some of the experiences that I've had. I'm happy to share as well. So let's talk first about general scheduling. I'm really curious to know for people what that actually means. And I'm going to put up a poll question just to get a sense here. How far in advance do you schedule your meetings? So we have 11% that, whoa, it's still changing. There we go. 10% now that arrange it at the start of every meeting, 30% at the end of the prior meeting, and 10% that do 2 weeks in advance. So 40% of the callers today are relatively on the fly, and then the 60% are planned at least 2 weeks in advance. Thanks for sharing, everyone. So that's something I definitely want to discuss a little bit, is how far in advance is good. There's a number of things to consider here when it comes to scheduling. There's definitely some benefits to scheduling far in advance, and there's also some benefits to having a schedule that comes together towards the end. One of the things that I'm hoping to advocate for during the course of this webinar, just as a spoiler, is some early planning, because I think the benefits for early planning outweigh the benefits that you get by planning last minute. And I'm happy to hear arguments in either direction for sure. That's why we have things like the chat. But the reason I feel personally anyways that scheduling far in advance is a benefit is it means that people are generally more prepared, and the roles are known early, which makes it nice for somebody when you're onboarding a new member. There's no kind of, I shouldn't say no, there's less running around at the start of the meeting trying to fill empty roles, because people know that they're in a rotation for their role. Hopefully they're signed up and prepared and ready to go, and they've confirmed their attendance before the meeting. That's where we're really to start to see the quality. So I personally think that a club should be at least 3 weeks ahead in their scheduling if they can be. If they are not able to be, then at minimum 2 weeks. If otherwise, it also looks to me, I'm in clubs that have done both, but I always feel a little uncomfortable at the end of the meeting when we're scheduling the next meeting's roles, because I think, well, boy, these guests are having to sit through this as we discuss this, and sometimes there's some back and forth for a little while, and then it makes it hard for the meeting to end on time. And of course, if you're doing it right at the start of the meeting, who's going to take on Toastmaster, for example, then it can be really scrambled and the quality can really suffer. At least, fill in some blanks. I can see at the start of the meeting that's bound to happen, where somebody's maybe said that they're going to take on this role and then life gets in the way or whatever. But that's something I absolutely encourage you to consider, is how can our club get towards at least 2 weeks ahead, if not a little bit more. Do members self-declare when they wish to deliver speeches, or are they on a rotation? This is another topic that I find relatively interesting. It's something I've seen in my clubs both ways as well. So let's put that as a poll question. We'll put the vote percentage there, and let's see what everybody does. Do members ask, or are they on a rotation? And while the poll's on there, I see Jim's put a comment in, and thanks very much for that, Jim. I've only experienced a corporate club. Last minute can work when we don't have guests and with experienced members, but that depends on people working independently on speeches. Absolutely, Jim. I think that when you have no guests, it can be a little bit easier to do that. The challenge, of course, is most of the time you don't know necessarily if a guest is going to show up. And that really applies in a corporate or a community club. You can end up having a surprise guest, and you may not know what to do then if everything's kind of disorganized and you're trying to put it together and welcome the guest. I find it gets a little bit chaotic, but if you know for sure you have no guests, then you can get away with it every now and then, I suppose. So the majority of clubs, 88% it looks like, folks that are on the call this evening anyways, are in a position where the members asked to speak, and just 13% is on a rotation. So that's very interesting. Like I say, I've seen it both ways, and the majority I have noticed is on some sort of request basis. The request basis works really well when you've got a vice president of education or perhaps somebody helping them out that really pushes members along. When I was vice president of education for a very strong club, we had a number of members that were, they had been around for many, many years. And I was a new member at the time and couldn't understand, wait a second, I mean, this person has been in our club for example, 8 years. And, they've only got advanced communicator bronze or advanced communicator silver, for example, and you start to kind of do the math of, well, wait a second. I mean, that means that this person's only done an average of, 2 speeches a year, for example. So some people need that push. Others are a little bit more self-driven, motivated. This is where I think a good opportunity to actually mention one of the things I did, this is back, of course, when we had the traditional program, is sat down with a mentee, and I would say, when are you going to do your icebreaker? And when are you going to do your 10th speech? And that way we can have some sort of foresight as to, okay, they're going to finish their CC on this date. And in a way that motivates them to work towards that. So just something to think about. I mean, obviously, you're not going to do that now. You'd more, when are you going to finish your first path, for example? But if you can finish 4 speeches in, I don't know, let's say 4 months. All right, well, that means you need to do 1 a month, and that can push them along a little bit. So I don't particularly have something I'm trying to suggest here. I think both methods can work. If you're going to do self-declaration of, I want to do my next speech now, then there certainly has to be a little bit of push behind certain members. And if it's a rotation basis, then you just have to be ready for more people dropping out and saying, you know what, I can't do this speech now, I'm not ready, or whatever the situation may be. So just something to think about whenever you work through your your speech assignments. So Jim, you've mentioned, to clarify my vote, I just started scheduling and put people on rotation as Vice President Education. Yeah, and like I'm saying here, I think that can be a really good thing to put people on a rotation, but just you do have to be ready for that, though, for sure. People bowing out at the last minute or saying that they're not ready for their speech. So there's definitely pros and cons to both sides. You just have to be ready. Encourage members to have a speech in their back pocket. That's one of the ways I managed to get through my communicator levels really quickly. Is I just had a speech always ready to go, and 99% of the time I felt somebody would cancel, and then away you go. Barbara said we've passed the board around for people to sign up. We're just learning toast. Okay, that's good. Yeah, to have some sort of board passed around can be helpful. At least there's some sort of scheduling, perhaps for an extended period of time then on the board. Yeah, and Toast is something we'll talk about. We're going to talk about the software just in a couple minutes here. So I'll be happy to talk about those as well and hear what your preferences are in software or perhaps lack of software. There's not necessarily a right answer to how you schedule your meetings. Who is doing the scheduling? I'm not going to put a poll up for this because I suspect the majority of clubs have their VP Education scheduling the meetings. But I am curious to hear, does anybody have anybody else doing it? It may be somebody that's helping out the Vice President Education, or do you have a completely different officer doing the assignment? And if so, what are they doing and what's the background for the reason that they're doing that? Yeah, Jim, thanks for sharing again about people dropping out. It does happen a lot, absolutely. You'll notice that. Toastmasters Promise, reminding people of that can be beneficial, but I don't know that it's really going to, it's definitely not going to change it 100%. It may improve a little bit, at least for a temporary basis, but I think it's just a matter of working with people and having somebody there that's maybe helping out the VP Education, kind of reminding people, hey, this is, these are your goals you've set out for yourself, and we're here to try and help, and what can we do, and that type of thing. I totally know the corporate club idea. My first club was, it wasn't completely corporate, but it was primarily people from one organization over lunchtime. And yeah, people are, planning to attend the meeting 1 minute, and then a project comes up the next minute and they're not coming anymore. Kevin shared that you print out multiple sign-up sheets, pass it around. Yeah, that seems to be very common amongst clubs, to pass around some sort of sign-up sheet. I think that works as long as it's, you're not just signing up for the next week, but maybe, 2, 3, 4 weeks in advance. And it's kind of nice too, as a member then, because you can say, well, next week I'm going to be, for example, Toastmaster, and 2 weeks from now I'm going to do a speech, and then 3 weeks from now I'm going to be the timer, or whatever it happens to be. Marking attendance is important though, so thanks for sharing that as well, Kevin. So I want to share a story from two different clubs that I've been involved with, and these are true stories, and I'm happy to share more about them. You can contact me anytime, and I can kind of go over what the experience was like being involved. So one club was strong, and then you'll notice that on the other side of the screen I've got a club that was strong. So both of these clubs have a history being presence distinguished. So they're clubs that have successfully had, at least 20 plus members. They have earned 5 or more, 9 or 10 distinguished club goals. So they have a history of being strong. On the club that remained strong, on the left-hand side there, the VP Education, they had a plan for 6 weeks. And the plan was just basic. It was essentially who's going to be the Toastmaster for the next 6 weeks, which 6 meetings for this club, as it was weekly. And they also had the speeches in for 6 weeks, and because they were doing a rotation for the speeches. The full schedule would be available for 4 weeks. So from the time that the full schedule was available, people go in, they could confirm their attendance, deny their attendance, and they could be replaced as we get towards the meeting date, closer and closer. After the meeting, whatever meeting we happen to have, the next week's Toastmaster then took over control of that meeting. So if I was the Toastmaster this week and say Jenny is the Toastmaster next week, at the conclusion of this meeting, Jenny will actually take over. So if anybody bows out last minute or anything, the Toastmaster works to fill in those replacements. We felt that that worked really well because, of course, the VP Education then was focusing more on kind of a long-term forecasting and putting a schedule together and figuring out, okay, well, you know, this person's on project 6 and they need to complete 8 projects, for example, to complete whatever award they're looking to complete. VP Education had some intel as to when that would actually come to fruition because they were scheduling it and looking further out, which means that when they were talking to the area director, they were able to give more accurate information and also plan more for, all right, well, looks like we are going for 10 out of 10 after all because we've got this person slated in for this award. And if it didn't happen, then at least they have a fallback that, well, we'll be at 9 out of 10, which is still President's Distinguished. So I thought that was a really good experience to be part of that. And the club ended up growing to more than 30 members and maintained more than 30 members for some time because there was kind of that energy to it and good planning that was involved. On the other side, this is a club that I'm working with to hopefully turn back around, but they did pass around that sign-up sheet of roles, and excuse me, sorry. I felt that that didn't provide accountability to the members, though, because, you know, the members, some of them would sign up, some of them wouldn't, some of them would say, oh, I'm not really sure about next week, and that became a little challenging then to get all the roles filled well in advance. And then, of course, they transferred that online. At this time, we were using Free Toast Host. And then we just kind of waited for people to sign up for roles. So, of course, that didn't really happen. And then it ended up kind of going down to a week-by-week basis. And eventually, no more agendas filled in prior to the meeting. It was very messy. And the quality, of course, of the meetings suffered greatly as a result. And so they went from President's Distinguished to now 7 members renewing in a matter of 3 months. So it's easy to fall down and hard to build up. So I just wanted to point out those 2 examples to show you that, you know, having that plan in some capacity has great benefits. And at least if you're on the right side in some aspects, for example, passing around a sign-up sheet, just have some way of holding people accountable for whatever they've signed up for. I think that's really imperative to continue driving success for the club, and also following up with those people that haven't signed up for certain roles for a long time, because there's going to be certain people that may avoid roles. Nobody's above being a timer, for example, and you know, new members, once again, we get into that little bit of push that may be necessary to get them to do, you know, it could be their first speech, could be their first time being an evaluator or Toastmaster. And just as VP Education, it can be challenging because you almost have to understand, you know, each member's style. Are they somebody that's kind of self-propelled and they're ready to go and you just kind of say, here's what you need to do, and they'll launch at it? Or are they somebody that, you know, they're going to get a little scared as they inch closer to something and they just need that little push just to get them to go into that? And it doesn't mean that you're being pushy. It just means that that's kind of what they need. It's just that little nudge to move on to that next step. So I would love to see everybody, if you're passing around a sign-up sheet, at least make sure that that's being kind of validated somewhere behind the scenes to ensure that members are getting what they've come for. That's the main thing, because otherwise the result ends up being more of a President's Distinguished to 7 members renewing, and then all of a sudden you're panicking because, of course, you need 8 to be in good standing, and that can have an impact on so many things for your club. So imperative. Jan Ireland has asked, how does short-term planning affect the quality experience for members? I think, this is an area where hopefully, first, I'm going to assume here by short-term planning that at least the speaker's coming prepared. It can be very hard, though, if you're in a club where, it's the start of the meeting and you're saying, all right, who wants to be a speaker? And anybody happen to have their book kicking around and, oh, you can do 5 to 7 minute table topic on this. That's definitely something that's not the best quality whatsoever. But if it's a case where, everything else is just coming together, it means that, first of all, the speech evaluator hasn't had an opportunity to communicate with the speaker, because it's very unlikely that the speech evaluator has any knowledge they're going to be a speech evaluator if you've done short-term planning, or if they do, it's not enough. And they may also, a lot of speech evaluators, even if they're not necessarily communicating with the speaker, which they should, they may want to at least read the project or what the objectives of it are to really get a deep understanding what exactly they're evaluating. So in a way, we rob them of that experience if we short-term plan those two roles. But there's a whole series of challenges that can come if you don't plan in advance in some aspect. And it doesn't mean that you have to have a full schedule weeks in advance, but it certainly means there has to be some sort of plan, at least a week or two, so people have that time to at least make some connections and prepare. Even something like grammarian, a lot of clubs think, well, that's an easy role. Well, it's not a hard role, I wouldn't suggest, but if you don't come knowing you're going to be grammarian, you haven't really prepared a word of the day or put any thought into it whatsoever. So it's kind of nice to have that time. Accountability, hard to push at a corporate club, Jim says. Like one member had a role of grammarian, didn't show. His reason the previous hour meeting ran long. What do you do in the face of that lack of accountability and attitude? I find it lacking and frustrating. Absolutely. It's when it comes to a corporate club, these things do come up. I think we have to look, though, at overall. I mean, is this a one-off, or is this something that's happening, pretty much every week? If it's happening pretty much every week, it may be worthy of talking to the member and saying, hey, you're missing a lot of meetings. You've signed up for a role, and we need you there. If you think there's a good chance that you're not going to be able to come, or you're going to come late, just decline to be safe. Because, like, I know, for example, when I go to my noon hour club, if I've got a meeting from 11 to 12, I can really make a decision relatively quickly. Is this a meeting that's likely to run over time? Or is it, one of those meetings where the chair is, bang, 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 and I'll be out of there in 45 minutes instead of the hour. So hopefully this person has a sense of that. And, it should be a rare thing that they're missing, not a regular thing. That shows that they're not really planning. They're just, oh, well, I'll sign up, and if I'm there, I'm there. If not, I'm not. Yeah. That could be a serious issue too if they end up being Toastmaster or something, because grammarian is something that, as much as I'm saying it's not good to have people just jump in, it's a little bit easier than saying, hey, would you like to be Toastmaster today? People at our club pay very little, half the lowest possible fee, I think, $22.50 for 6 months. Do you think this has an impact on people in their commitments to their meetings? Or should we focus more on the benefits and show testimonials of the Toastmasters experience? That's a tough one to answer, and I think in some ways it could be an individual thing, because the club I was in, which was a lunchtime club, and my company paid for my dues completely. I didn't pay anything. I still think there was a good sense of accountability. I mean, yes, we had the members like you're describing, where somebody would, say 10 minutes before the meeting, hey, you know what, I'm not going to make it because I've got this deadline, or I'm in this meeting, or whatever the case may be. But we had a lot of members that were, they were pushing the education program fully. There was a culture of support in the club, working together as members of that club to make it better. And last year, the club, I think, had, I want to say 3 area directors all came from that one club. So it's very possible. It depends on the individuals, the culture within the club, and how it's kind of, but I don't know, like personally, I don't really think that the amount people are paying necessarily has a difference. But that's me. And for some members, maybe, yeah, they don't really care because they're not paying. But once again, that gets down to an individual thing, I think, more than a general across the board. I really don't believe that every single member would be different, would act differently because they're paying versus the organization's paying, or that they're going to be all the same. I think it's good when organizations pay part or all of the dues, though, because it does encourage other people to join, and they think, oh, well, there's no cost to me to get in, and then you get in, and it's a matter of the club officers kind of surrounding those people with support and show them all the great things they get out of Toastmasters and the value. The other thing I did as VP Education that you may find helpful is running some of those education sessions from, for example, the Successful Club series about different things. Like there's one about stepping outside your club so people can learn about, hey, speech contests, and I can go to the area level and right up to international if I want. The education program, although I don't know if that's been updated. What other one is there? There's the Toastmasters Promise, which I think it's called Keeping the Commitment. There's quite a lot of good ones, so I would encourage trying those out every now and then. If anybody in your club is working the traditional program, it's also good towards Advanced Communicator Silver and Advanced Leader Bronze credit. So good excuse to run those sessions. Somebody needs it for educational credit, and it's going to help the members see kind of the bigger picture, so to speak. Proactive scheduling. We've kind of touched on this already, but I see there's some more comments. So let's quickly look at those. So Karen here, 2 things. Number 1, meeting roles. This is the most important to ensure the meeting has value for the attendees no matter what, especially the Table Topics Master, the Table Topics Evaluator, and General Evaluator. We publish a newsletter at the beginning of each month that includes the proposed role assignments for the upcoming month, taking into consideration known absences. The designated meeting Toastmaster then confirms those major roles in the week prior to the meeting by publishing draft agenda with meeting theme and manages the changes as people respond with their actual availability. I think that's awesome. I think having those roles confirmed well in advance, and just giving people the heads up in a monthly newsletter is a really cool thing to do. I find it interesting, though, that you don't mention the speaker. I do think those are important, so it would be nice to look at that, maybe the possibility of asking people, hey, do you want to be a speaker and a speech evaluator? Okay, and so you guys are doing it just a week in advance? Yeah, I mean, that's probably possible to do the speeches a week in advance. I don't know what the uptake is, though, but just keep that in mind, because, of course, most people have come to Toastmasters for that skill. Of course, the impromptu is important as well, but I really like what you guys are doing with that newsletter and then kind of firm everything up the week ahead. It's the major roles especially that are important to get out of the way. Thanks for sharing that, Karen. And Carol has said, it seems like each club is creating their own method of scheduling. I've searched Toastmasters International VP Ed resource material and cannot find any generic spreadsheet that can be filled in manually for several weeks in advance. It appears on the World Wide Web that clubs attempt and do develop a variety of sign-up and accounting forms. You have hit the nail on the head, Carol. There's not a particular software or method that Toastmasters International provides for scheduling. There is some great tools out there. Excel spreadsheets, of course, do give you a lot of flexibility in how you set it up. I've seen clubs that just send out an email with an Excel spreadsheet either in the body or attached with the detailed schedule for the coming weeks and kind of a long-range forecast. I've seen people use Google Forms, so all the club members can go in and kind of see and fill things out. Lots of different ways that can be done with Excel. But as we go through the various software in just a minute here, we'll be able to kind of see what other options may be available as well. I do like Excel. I think it's got some huge benefits. There's also some really good software out there if that's something that your club is up for using. So perhaps we could actually jump into that. So tools. Before we talk about the individual tools, I'd like to see what your club is using currently to schedule meetings. Okay, so very mixed answers from what I can see. We've got people using Excel or TurboBase, EasySpeak, FreeToast, a couple people here that say they don't. Hopefully that changes after this evening. And please, I also welcome, besides of course the chat and the questions, I do welcome anybody to contact me individually anytime as well if you've got questions about anything to do with scheduling or anything Toastmasters other than that. Really want to make sure that your clubs are set up for success, and scheduling is, in my opinion, probably the most important thing to making a good quality meeting. So thank you for sharing that. And thanks, Kevin, as well, for mentioning that FreeToast has the multiple meeting sign up sheet, which prints out the upcoming schedules automatically with blanks for openings. That is a great feature of that software, and that's one of my favorite software. So we'll get into that as well. So Excel is definitely an option for scheduling the meetings. As I already mentioned, the benefit with Excel is you can kind of set it up however you like it to look. I mean, it's just a spreadsheet, so you've got full control over the columns, rows, how far ahead you wish to go with your meetings, etc. There's a lot of capabilities built into it. The challenge, of course, is it's not accessible by everyone unless you put it on somewhere like Google Forms or some other type of forum or something where people can consume it a little bit easier. Risk with that, of course, though, as soon as you put it out to the general population, you either need to put some sort of password on it or just remember that anybody can get to it, and you be very careful, of course, who has edit rights. And of course, most of the time I find that when clubs use this on Google Forms, for example, they're allowing everybody to edit it because, of course, people are signing up for roles and everything, which means it can get lost. And so there's a risk there, but it can be a very powerful yet simple tool if you choose to use Excel. So I certainly don't knock Excel in any way, shape, or form, but just do caution, the use of it can cause a challenge with either access, or if there's free access, potentially losing things. So just something to keep in mind. And Jim, you've put here as well that you've put some formulas in to show how many times someone's done a role and the last date they did it. And that's exactly why I think Excel gives you some huge benefits that people may not realize. And we get into that challenge, of course, where I think a lot of clubs have members with technology challenges. And to just use Excel itself, it's not a big deal. But if somebody that doesn't usually work on computers is put in a VP education position, for example, they need to be able to figure out how to do some of that editing or who to talk to do it. So once again, not necessarily saying it's a bad thing, because that's something I'd be looking to do as well, Jim, if I was using Excel to schedule meetings. But just something to keep in mind is, how does this get maintained in a longer term, or are any of our members going to get lost in some of the complexities here? But that's really with all the different options for scheduling, unless you're using pen and paper and handing it around, which has challenges in its own rights as well. On the kind of Excel, I guess, same vein is TurboBase. TurboBase is a software that you can use. It's web-based. Turbobase.com is their URL. They have some benefits and some drawbacks. With TurboBase, they did start in 2004, so they've been going on for quite a while. We have some clubs in District 21 that are using it. It has not had any updates, I don't believe, in years, though, so it's a little bit archaic in some of the ways it does things, and there's not a lot of advances happening with TurboBase. What I find is it is very much like an Excel spreadsheet. It has an area where all the active members of the club are, inactive members, and it also has an area where you can schedule meetings. And in a way, it looks a little bit like Excel when you go in there, because it's almost got like the columns and then people who've signed up for the different roles. I believe people can go in there and volunteer for roles. There's no way, I don't think, to actually confirm, yes, I've accepted this role. It just shows you slotted in there. One of the other features it offers, and all the other software we're going to talk about today as well, features the ability to email all members. And that's all members who have roles or all members who are active in the club. So there's some benefits there, because it's like Excel in some aspects, but offers a login for all of your members to get in there, and also the ability to email out. So I wouldn't recommend it as the top tool to use, but it is worthy of consideration if you're looking at something that people have to log in to get to, and a site where you could use anywhere in the world potentially without losing it or having to keep track of things. This may be the answer for you. A little bit more simple to use, which of course has a benefit for those that are not tech savvy, but just keep in mind it is also a little bit older, not a lot of customization that can be done, but worthy of, you can, it's free. All these softwares are free. There's no harm in throwing your club in and trying it out for yourself, even with your executive officers of the club, and making a decision if it's worthy of your consideration. The next software is FreeToast Host, and hopefully almost everybody is familiar with this software. It is, of course, a site that gives you access to a free web page, and they have a scheduling feature. Why I'm separating that a little bit is because I think FreeToast Host is hands down the best option for Toastmasters clubs to get a free website and get going. It's got some standard features. It's got the ability to customize a lot more than most people realize. And if you don't believe me, please do a Google search for awesome FreeToast Host sites, because there's some really cool websites out there that clubs have from all over the world that you can kind of steal their ideas and try to put it onto your FreeToast Host site. The scheduling piece is decent. It's, in my opinion, not the best. You may like it. It may work best for your club, and that's completely fine. I'm just kind of sharing a one-sided opinion that I think it's the best for having a website, not necessarily the best for scheduling, but not bad either. So I'm going to show you what this and EasySpeak are the two sites that actually offer you an agenda as well. So with the other options, like an Excel spreadsheet, you still have to make a manual agenda or something unless you've got some sort of fancy mail merge set up. But with this, it actually spits out an agenda that looks like this. So it's obviously, this one is kind of blank and just something I found online randomly, but it's got the roles, which you can fill out whatever the title of the roles are. You can fill out the timing, so it keeps track of the time on the left-hand side. The wording at the top can be changed. And down the right-hand side, you've got the members who are assigned to the roles, and it'll just show blank if there's nobody assigned. On the bottom, it's got an area that will show members that are attending or not attending, any notes that have been added into the software. So it's not a bad site. The Toastmaster usually has control to edit the top box, what shows on the agenda, to assign people to roles, send emails out about the upcoming meeting. There's a lot of great abilities within that system. So, like I said, not my favorite, but that doesn't mean I don't think it's a good one. I think a lot of clubs use this and use it successfully at that. So definitely consider FreeToast Host in your quest for a club. Karen has mentioned here, we have found that FreeToast Host works very well once we made the commitment to use it, spent some time to figure it out, and created our own practices around agenda creation, role assignment, agenda email, agenda printing. We tried other methods historically, but at this point, FreeToast Host has proved itself for us. Absolutely, yeah, and that is one of the drawbacks with this is there's definitely a little bit of a learning curve because it's a new site that people aren't familiar with, where you go to do various things, particularly if you're an officer and you're kind of setting up how the club works, so to speak. There's a lot of behind the scenes power that can be driven there, and people need to know where they can do certain things. Kevin's mentioned it's version 3 now and so many new features. Speakers can select their pathway speech from a list and enter title and introduction. Absolutely, that's another ability with that software. You can enter your speech introduction. I think the confirming attendance thing is new as well with version 3. Can't remember all the changes, but there has been some significant steps forward in the last little while for sure. Absolutely, I think that the recent changes to the software are in the right direction, and it's likely to continue moving in the right direction because there's some people behind it that continually look for opportunities to improve. The other software I want to talk about is EasySpeak, and I started out talking about FreeToast Host as the best website creator with an agenda ability built into it. I look at EasySpeak as the opposite. It's something that is a meeting scheduler with the ability to have a website built into it as well. So I don't terribly recommend the website aspect, but the agenda perspective, I think, is absolutely awesome in this. But of course, there's pros and cons to all the options. With EasySpeak, the challenge with it is it's probably the most complex to get used to navigate around. And that would especially include for the people that are setting it up and kind of the VP education, but even for the members. And there's not, there's a lot of ability to customize it. There's a whole administrative console that you get to go into the back side of things and change all your club settings. There's a lot of information though on the screen that can be overwhelming. It also spits out agendas, and one of the other things I like about this site is it has these template emails that you can send out for your club. And basically the first one's just, hey, this meeting's coming up, FYI. And then there's kind of options like, hey, you're assigned a role, please come in and confirm your attendance, which is a huge other feature with this software. everyone can confirm their attendance for the meeting and for their meeting roles. So if you've got some people that have confirmed their attendance at a meeting, but they're not taking on a role, but a role opens up, you could always contact them because you know they're coming to the meeting anyways. I like that about it. The other thing I like about this software is, as you can see on the screen, if you're joining us on computer, it's got a duration, and it shows what time the light should go green, yellow, and red for people when they're speaking. So that's really nice because people can go on for whatever length of time. You know, they've been a member as timer, and right away they know what time to change the lights and everything, even if it's their first time. So that's another reason I like this. Same thing, you can kind of edit some of the things up top. It has a default where it highlights if you've been to distinguished club, so that's kind of a nice proud thing to, you know, share with your members and your guests. And it does, as you can see on the right hand side, it's got the Toastmasters logo. On the left hand side, you can put in your own picture if you choose to. Just be careful, of course, of the Toastmasters International branding. So for me, that's why I personally like this software, but once again, it is more complex for those that aren't necessarily tech savvy. It can be a bit challenging, but the reward, of course, is you've got a lot more control, and I personally think this spits out the best automatic agenda because of the timing and everything built right into it. And you also notice it's very small, but it actually talks about which project people are working on and gives a little bit of a kind of a synopsis of it. Geez, I'm losing my ability. Sorry about that. So it gives you that right from the agenda. You can put in an introduction for your speech and everything as well. I'm always happy to share anything about this. And we have a District 21 member who's volunteered to be the Easy Speak chair for the District 21, and her name is April Kennedy. I'd gladly put you in touch if you want to know more about Easy Speak. And you know, I'm certainly not trying to say this is the you know, I personally think it's the best, but I'm not trying to say it's your only option or you should really jump to it, because it really depends on your club and you as an individual what you like to use. But I would strongly encourage this be considered if you're looking at some sort of software that can do the scheduling and kind of do it all. When you compare Easy Speak and FreeToast Host, the reason I called these two out specifically is they are kind of the two leaders when it comes to scheduling. So there's obviously with Excel, there's, you know, that's, you know, your own, however you set that up, that's kind of between you and the club members. TurboBase is similar to Excel, except it's in a web format and a little bit easier to use. These two sites, though, give you the full meal deal. They give you the agendas and the ability to go in and assign roles as the Toastmaster and pretty much anything else you want to do. And hopefully through the course of just the last couple minutes talking about each of them, it helps you figure out which one is better for me. There's a lot more simplicity probably in FreeToast Host. It's still a little more complex, of course, for people that aren't computer friendly. But there's tools on the Easy Speak side that really help outweigh it in some aspects as well. So both of them are two serious contenders I would look at if you're looking at doing some changes to how you schedule meetings. Easy Speak, the way it's set up by default is members go in and pick what project they want to work on for a speech. And then they put in the title of the speech, what dates they prefer and everything. And then the VP Education just basically goes and slots them in. FreeToast Host would allow you to just schedule people to do speeches. It also has a drop down for projects, but it's a little bit more work in Easy Speak. It's putting more accountability on the members to go in and actually request their speeches, which the majority of you are already doing. So that is essentially where we stand right now with the different softwares. Is there's benefits, there's pros and cons to all the choices, but I encourage everyone to go out there and at least explore them all. And there's YouTube videos as well about the individual different options. I watched one actually on TurboBase that was interesting. The fellow explained how their club is using it. There is the sites themselves provide some information, frequently asked questions, demos, those types of things, and you just have to request access to them, and they set up your club for you. If I recommend most clubs take both these options that are on the screen right now. Actually, FreeToast Host for your website, EasySpeak for your scheduling. I know it's two sites, and that can be a little confusing, but with FreeToast Host, you can kind of shut down the member area if you want to, and still have it being your homepage for guests and that type of thing, where you're advertising what's going on with your club, making it more of a VP public relations resource. And then on the other side of the coin, you've got the EasySpeak, where all members have that login and ability, because it can, of course, get confusing if you're using both sites for two different needs, and members have two different logins for them. Certainly very challenging. Karen mentioned on FreeToast Host, we also use the member downloads area to store club documents. Huge benefit there with FreeToast Host. Once you get in, you can do things like, you can have member documents. EasySpeak, it's a little more complex because they have a forum where you could post things, including different documents, but it doesn't just give you the ability to just have a download section directly where you can just go in. So you'd have to go into the individual posts in the forum and actually pick what you want. Does anybody have any questions about all the different tools that are available? I'm sure there's more out there too, so if anybody wanted to share any others that you know of, I'm happy to hear about them. Nothing but beneficial. Jim just asked if there's any reason Toastmasters International doesn't have something. Or bring these in-house. Yeah, I mean, there's some great software, and I don't know exactly why. I mean, I suspect it's probably because of resources. Particularly right now, World Headquarters is a little bit overwhelmed with the different things they've got going on, because there's, of course, Pathways, which was just built, and now they're figuring out how they can enhance it and make it better. The move to Denver, they had, I believe it was 60% turnover in staff. A lot of people decided to stay in Southern California over Denver. And of course, there's the financial aspect as well. There's drawing some funds, for example, from the Ralph C. Smedley Memorial Fund for some different Pathways things and that type of thing. So it probably is something that if they did it, there'd be the cost aspect, I suspect. Where these people are doing it as volunteers, they're paying out of their own pocket to develop these great softwares. And to be quite honest with you, I suspect this is probably better for us, because as soon as it gets into Toastmasters World Headquarters hands, there just becomes some more rules and that type of thing they need to follow before any changes are made and that type of thing. So at least by having volunteers, it can be kind of within that person's abilities to change whatever they want, and we can make recommendations directly to them. Carol's mentioned that it is strange that TI hasn't confronted this issue. Yeah, it is, and maybe that's somewhere they'll go down the road. I wouldn't rule it out as a possibility, especially now that they've got an app, Toastmasters app, and some other great things that they're building. But for the moment, for whatever reason, they're leaving it up to clubs, and maybe that's part of our leadership growth as club officers, is we're figuring out how to schedule meetings. I don't really know what the deal is there, but we do lose members over scheduling problems. We lose clubs over scheduling problems because people aren't, they kind of get a little bit, I don't want to say lazy, but really that's what it is with scheduling and prepping well in advance. Then your quality dips instantly, and it becomes harder to convert guests to members. So your retention goes down. So that's really challenging. If your retention is going down, you're having trouble getting people in the door, or if you are getting people in the door, they're not signing up because they're seeing something that's not a great product. And that's what we have to remember, is when guests come through the door, they're seeing the product, and and you have to kind of sell yourself however you want people to see you. And if it's, everything coming together in the last 30 seconds before the gavel hits the lectern, then it obviously affects people's perception of that club. And Toastmasters International in itself, which can become even bigger issue if people have that perception that, oh, they're kind of not organized, then they're not going to go to any club. We have a section at the bottom. People can mark themselves as away, Barbara Bryant mentioned. Is that with Free Toast Toast? I know Free Toast Toast offers that. Easy Speak also does. You click on an X and that you're not going to be attending the meeting. And it also prevents assignments. The only other thing I forgot about Easy Speak I just wanted to insert as well is it also allows, it says automation written in its logo, it allows automatic assignment of roles, and it's all built in smart. So it knows, for example, oh, it's been 157 days since you've taken on this role. So you've been the longest since you've done Toastmaster, for example, and slots you into those roles. So that's kind of nice that you can hit a button as VP Education. It does all the assigning, and it's fair. There's nobody getting, back to back grammarian unless it's by, design. All right, well, we are approaching the end of our seminar this evening, and it's been a lot of fun, as it always is. I've missed doing them. The last couple of weeks we've had kind of business take precedent over the sessions, but now we are just heading back into a lot of good topics. So reach out to me anytime if you got questions or thoughts about scheduling. I'm always happy to help out and answer questions. And hopefully you've gained some knowledge on some of the tools that you can use for scheduling or some of the theory behind scheduling this evening. Again, I can't emphasize enough. I mean, a lot of this is my opinion and my experiences in things. My email address is correct. Yep, that's my email address. If you want to reach out, feel free anytime. And we can all grow out of this, myself included, of course. So thank you. It's not Brown. Sorry. Down with a B. mbound.d21@gmail.com is the email address. And thank you, Jim, as well. It's a lot of fun putting these together. Sometimes it can be a little hectic, but it is always worth it. And I hope everybody has a great evening, and hope to see you again next week.